All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I know we'll have some folks trickling in, but just to give you all some context on what we're doing and on our session today, my name is Will Moss. I'm the founder and CEO of HBCU Connect. We've been in business for many, many years. We organically got into the diversity recruitment space because I created a social network many years ago to stay connected with my classmates from Hampton University, as well as other HBCUs out there. And we had some savvy recruiters and diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders that tapped us on the shoulder and asked us for ways to recruit diverse talent. And this was many years ago, back in the late 90s, leading up to 2004 when I started running HBCU Connect full time. And the thing is, we have many, many years of experience, and also many, many years working with different partners. And one of those partners is Celeste Warren, who is the former leader for diversity, equity, and inclusion at Merck. I think your specific title, Celeste, was it Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer? Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
So, we've worked with Celeste over the years, and even leading up to our partnership where Celeste was a presenter at our in-person event for HBCU Connect's conference and career fair in Washington, D.C. this past year, where Celeste actually did sort of an in-person lunch and learn at that event as well. And so Celeste is the author of a new book. Celeste, I'll let you kind of talk about that as well as, of course, your presentation that you have for us today. But the thing is, with this session, we're sharing our experience and knowledge having worked in the field for many years. And we thought by doing these lunch and learn sessions that we could not only share our experience, but also make ourselves available to you for questions and to help you navigate some of the challenges and be more effective in your current roles, either as talent acquisition professionals, as diversity and inclusion and representative professionals where you work. So I actually reached out to Celeste and asked Celeste if she would be willing to present on some of her experiences considering the current environment. 2025 has been a pretty challenging year when it comes to what we do for those of us that realize the importance of diversity and inclusion. And considering those challenges and also considering Celeste's vast experience as a leader in the space for many years, I asked Celeste to come and maybe share her experience with you all and make herself available also for live Q&A, as some of you all have different challenges in your positions and you want to be or continue to be effective in that role. So without further ado, I'll allow Celeste to introduce herself. But Celeste, like I said, is the former VP and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at a Fortune 50 global corporation with a 28-year tenure. So, Celeste, again, thank you for being our presenter, but I'll hand it over to you to start your presentation, and I'll be here to support.
Thank you, Will. And thanks to everyone for taking the time out of what I'm sure is busy, busy, busy end of the year. I call it the dash before the crash, and getting ready for the holidays and wrapping up your work at your respective organizations. I wanted to take a little bit of time just to talk with all of you, as Will said, about what's going on in the world today, but just a little bit about me. I was 28 years at Merck. I was the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the last 10 years there, and retired in July of this year and started Celeste Warren Consulting, where I can continue my mission, my passion to advance equity and inclusive leadership and organizations. I did publish my second book in July, right around the timing of my retirement, and it really did help to launch where I'm going in this next chapter of my life. It's called The Truth About Equity: What It Really Is, What It Isn't, and Why Everyone Wins When We Get It Right. So if you have an opportunity to pick up the book, it's a nice Christmas gift for someone as well. But I'm really, really looking forward to our conversation today. And what we're going to talk about is walking in integrity in changing times. I'd like to be able to just talk to all of you about and give you practical tools, pragmatic tools. Those of you that know me, I like to make sure that what I'm talking about is something that really helps you to leave this session and say, okay, well, what can I incorporate when I go back to my organization? And so that's what I want to be able to provide to you, just a little bit of tidbits. And then the most important thing for me is the engagement, the conversation. And so, what I'd like to do is just be able to provide you with some practical tools to be authentic and courageous during this time that we're in right now, where a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, programs, policies, procedures, there's been some pullback on that in some organizations in the United States. And then how can you maintain inclusion within your sphere of influence? How can you continue to be that ambassador for diversity, equity, and inclusion because it is something that is core to your values as an organization? So we'll go ahead and get started. What I'm going to talk about is kind of naming the moment, and then what can you do to thrive in this moment, and then we'll close it out with a Q&A. If you could, real quickly in the chat, how has the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion changed at your respective companies? Have they have they gotten rid of the organization, that department in total? Have they moved it underneath some other organization at your company? Have they scrubbed a lot of the language? Have they discontinued some of the programs, or are they still going strong? I'd just be curious as to some of the, where you're at right now. And if you feel comfortable sharing it in the chat, please do. Yeah, a lot of you are saying it's all gone, it's pivoting, no longer have to provide affirmative action, goals, and procedures. Yeah, that's a big one with a lot of different organizations. Yeah, you can see that in some areas it's still going strong, but cautious. Yep, I can see that. No longer a recruiting tool. Budgets are shrinking in a lot of these organizations when it comes to a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Thank you for contributing. I'm glad we have a lively group. So we'll get ready for those questions at the end of the conversation. But just kind of to give you a backdrop, and many of you know, and you put in the chat, many organizations are reevaluating or scaling back on their diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments. Some of them because of pressures from the current administration, some of them from legal pressures, some of them have contracts with the federal government, and so they're having to have to do this balancing act. But a lot of this, as a result, some of the employees are feeling that their companies through the leaders and the executives have changed direction. And this session, we're going to offer a path for you to continue to be authentic in your passion, in how you feel about diversity, equity, and inclusion as an individual within your span of influence, even within this constraint and these constraining times. There are basically 4 actions to thrive that I'm going to talk about with all of you. And I'll go into a little bit of detail about all of them and give some specific examples. And this should help you. Hopefully, it's something that you can leave this webinar and take back with you as you try to determine, like, how do I continue to be my authentic self? I was a diversity ambassador. I was a diversity leader. I was someone who was very passionate about it prior to the changes that have happened in my organization. And how do I continue to be my authentic self in my passion moving forward? So the 4 areas that we'll cover: walking in transparency and integrity, anchoring in your sphere of influence, practicing courageous allyship, not just allyship, but courageous allyship, and then sustaining your voice and your values. So let's talk about the first one, walking in transparency and integrity. Many times, you and your colleagues, your fellow employees, you find yourself hearing messages from the executives within your company, and these messages center around, specifically around changes that are happening within the organization when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so afterwards, people that trust you, your peers, the people that you work with, they're coming to you and they're asking you, well, what do you think about what so and so said about the direction that we're going in, about these changes that are happening? They trust you. They trusted you before these changes and they trust you now. And they're sort of looking at you as that peer influencer, that peer leader, and are asking, well, what do I do? What are some of the things that I need to do? And so they're asking you these questions and wanting to get your opinion because they value it and they trust you. You need to be able to find language that's both aligned to those messages, but it's in your own voice. And it still is very important in your voice, in your authenticity. And the goal isn't to rewrite the corporate message. That's not a smart thing to do because the organization is going to go where the organization is going to go. But you have to explain it with a level of integrity so that people within your span of influence, they still trust you and you help them to understand, well, here's kind of what I think and here's kind of what I'm going to do. And walking in transparency, it doesn't mean blind agreement with everything. That's not what it means. It means being able to communicate truth with empathy and with consistency. You want to make sure that you're being empathetic because that's the reason why individuals are coming to you. They want to know kind of, well, what do you think about this? And it gives you an opportunity to say, well, here's what they said, here's what I think, and here's how I'm going to deal with it. And that's kind of what they want to hear from you. And a lot of times, many of you, because of maybe you're a leader of an employee resource group, or you're in a type of a network within your organization, or the role that you have, they trust you, and your span of influence is quite large. And in some cases, it's even larger than certain leaders within the organization. And so you want to make sure that you're still able to, here's what they said, here's what I think about it, and here's how I'm going to deal with it. And then what it does is it gives you an opportunity to speak your truth, but it also empowers them to be able to say, okay, well, here's how I'm going to deal with it as well. The second action is you want to be able to anchor in your sphere of influence. Even in constraining times, you influence culture through your behavior and your individual leadership. I believe that everyone, everyone is an individual leader. Whether you are a direct manager, a supervisor, an executive, it doesn't make a difference. We all have spans of influence. And so you want to be able to influence culture, the culture of your organization through your own behavior. When diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are shrinking, policies are changing, programs are going away or being evolved, it's easy to feel powerless. It's very, very easy to feel powerless. But even when organizational focus narrows, your sphere of influence remains vast. And the key is to redirect your energy to the areas where you can still have the most meaningful impact. What are those areas that you can control? What is it that you have and can direct your energy into those areas? You can focus on everyday actions, how you collaborate, how you communicate, how you make space and time for others. Small, consistent acts of inclusion, like inviting different voices into conversations or in meetings or questioning assumptions, that can create real cultural change. If you're in a meeting and you see that someone's being talked over, they're not being respected, or they're being marginalized, you can call that out. And you don't have to do it by banging your fist on the table, screaming, or not showing people respect. You can do it in a way that still shows people respect, but also empowers people to be able to elevate their voice by just saying something like, oh, Sally, you had an interesting point there. Can you talk a little bit more about it? I'm kind of curious as to what you meant. Giving them the opportunity to be able to voice and elevate their voice. So, how you collaborate, how you communicate and make space for others, that sends a very strong message to your sphere of influence and those people that are looking at you as peers. Be a bridge builder, not a bridge destroyer. Support diversity, equity, inclusion efforts by connecting people, especially people who have different identities, sharing resources, encouraging participation in employee resource groups or learning sessions. That's one way that you can be a bridge builder, inviting people to these sessions, helping them to understand, about different identities, or inviting them to a session that your local employee resource group, or you yourself going to an employee resource group session or a learning session that is comprised of people or being held by people who identify differently than you do, and encourage people to come with you. That's one way that you can do it. You don't need formal authority. You don't need to have um, titles under or behind your name or under your name to foster inclusion and belonging. You can do that on your own. And then you want to model inclusive behaviors, demonstrate those behaviors through respect and through empathy. Others will notice and they'll mirror your inclusive behavior, making your influence ripple beyond your immediate role. I like to call it the employee ripple effect. If you model those behaviors and people see you demonstrating it in your interactions, in your collaborations, in meetings, in the cafeteria, at the water cooler, in various different settings, they'll mirror that because they'll see how it makes you look, how it makes you look at that as a leader who people value and who they trust. By intentionally investing energy in what you can control and influence, you can keep inclusion alive in everyday decisions, proving that diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't a program, it's not a policy, it's a practice of focus and integrity. And it's also a commitment as well. The third thing that I want to talk about is practicing courageous allyship. Allyship should not be performative. It should not be something that I have power over you, and so I'm going to be your ally. Allyship, active, real, courageous allyship, is knowing when to challenge, when to influence quietly, and when to build alliances behind the scene. Everyone should be an ally to those that identify differently than you do. Whatever your identity is, however you identify yourself, what community you belong to, you should be an ally to communities that identify differently than you do. This isn't a power structure. It's not oh, I'm an ally and I'm an ally for people who are weaker than me or powerless than me, or that's not what allyship is about. That's performative and it's condescending as well. You want to be an ally, knowing when to challenge, knowing when to influence quietly, knowing when to build alliances, knowing when to empower people, knowing when to support people is critically important. Some ways that you can do that: speak up against bias and injustice. You want to be able to challenge microaggressions, challenge people when you hear them talking about things in a stereotypical way, or and challenging exclusionary behavior when you see it, even when it feels uncomfortable or risky. As I said, you can do it in a way where you're not being disrespectful, because when you're disrespectful to someone else, you're also shining the mirror back on yourself, and being disrespectful to your own self. You need to be able to call things out and challenge things, so you can change cultures, so you can change behaviors, so you can alter the behavior of people who may not know what they're doing. And just, don't assume that they're doing it maliciously, but assume it as a way to be able to create a learning moment for people. Use respectful but direct language to call out inequities and support those that are affected. Be able to make sure that you're reaching out to them, and understand, kind of, hey, how can I help you? How can I help to empower you and elevate your voice? You want to also amplify marginalized voices in meetings, projects, or everyday interactions intentionally. Uplift and credit ideas from colleagues who may be overlooked or interrupted. How many times have you sat in a meeting and you see that your colleague has been overstepped, overtalked, her ideas have been plopped? And what I call plopped is they say something, nobody pays attention to it, they change the subject, and then 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, somebody else brings up the exact same thing, and everyone talks about how what a great idea it was, giving credit to that person and not to the person who originally brought the idea up. And so you can say, in a nice way, but in a direct way, in a respectful way, you know, she had that idea a few minutes ago, and let's kind of talk a little bit about what she was thinking about it, and if it truly is how you reiterated it, Jahan, in just a few minutes ago. Give them the opportunity to talk about it. Or they bring up an idea and no one seems to really acknowledge it. You repeat it, give them credit for it, and say how you think it was a really well thought out idea, and ask them to elaborate on it. But advocate for them for fair recognition and visibility of your colleague. And then commit to continuous learning and self reflection. Continue to say, okay, what could I have done in that situation? Should I have done something? Should I not have done something? Did I do it in the right way? Did I not do it in the right way? How did I make that person feel? Both the person who was being the marginalized, and the person who was behaving in an exclusive manner. Do that self reflection after those types of encounters, so you can learn and continue to grow. Go back to both individuals afterwards and say, I said this during the meeting. Here's the reason why I said it or I did it. I hope it was not something that you felt was inappropriate, but I felt it was the right thing to do at that time. And then ask them how they feel and listen empathetically to both of you, the colleagues. And that helps you to provide that self reflection and to grow as a leader within yourself as well. Educate yourself about others' experiences, privileges, and systemic inequities. Reflect on your own biases, as I'm sure all of you have been through unconscious bias training and various different trainings around biases, but you know that we all have biases. We all do. We're all human. We all have biases. So we need to reflect on those biases and take responsibility for growth without placing the burden of education on those coworkers who are underrepresented in the workplace. Take on that burden of education yourself. And you can do it by reading articles, reading, different books, attending different sessions, webinars like today's webinar that Will and HBCU Connect are doing. Educate yourself, take it on yourself, and then sit down with individuals who identify differently than you do and have those conversations and those dialogues because you've educated yourself, and then you can have a better conversation with them. The fourth action is about sustaining your voice and your values. And you want to be able to reframe resistance into resilience. And a lot of times when messages come to you and you have this look on your face or this feeling that, oh my God, no one is acceptance of change right away. There's a methodology that you go through as an individual when you have to go through change, whether that's in your personal life or your professional life. And you want to try to understand, okay, what do I need to do? How do I need to progress so I can understand this change? And then that helps you to build resilience. And yes, when we all are encountered with change, our first thing that we do, just unconsciously, is resist. That's the first sort of thing that comes up in our mind, in our behavior, even if it's just for a second or a minute or just a few minutes. But our first reaction to change is naturally resistance. And then we go through the process. And so we want to be able to reframe resistance into resilience. And how do you do that? Focus on purpose and not necessarily pushback. When facing challenges or change, shift from asking, oh my God, why is this happening to me? Why are they doing this? This isn't fair. I don't like this. But change it to, what can I learn or contribute through this? What can I do that helps me to understand the change that needs to happen? Who else do I need to talk to so I understand it? And then also, what you need to do is think, how do I get through it? Excuse me. This turns that frustration into forward momentum. You want to practice emotional agility. Acknowledge discomfort or fear of the change. Acknowledge it. Like I said, we're all human beings. We all go through change, either in our personal lives or our professional lives, but we all go through change. That's just the nature of life. But acknowledge your discomfort or fear, and then consciously choose responses that align with your values and your goals instead of reacting defensively. Build connection and support. Engage with peers, mentors, employee resource groups to share perspectives. Involve yourself in what sometimes they call in companies, they have community conversations or dialogues where they're sponsored by employee resource groups where you can come together and talk about the issues and be able to share how you're feeling and how you're moving through it and learn from others. That can help strengthen resilience from a collective standpoint, reminding yourself that you're not navigating these changes alone. Because, as I said, everyone's going through change, and you don't want to be perceived as, oh, I'm doing this alone. Nobody else is doing this. And it's so very, very hard when you think you're going through changes alone. The saying, misery loves company. Well, you don't want to linger too long in misery, but you do want to engage with your colleagues to say, okay, how can we get through this together? What are you feeling? How are you feeling? Here's how I'm feeling. And here's what I'm going to try to do to build up my resilience and get through this. But we can get through it together. That's what I think is really, really important. So before we go into questions and talk about whatever's on your mind, just a reminder: you want to walk in transparency and integrity. You want to be able to talk about what's happening within your organization, the changes that are happening, but you want to do it in a way where you're transparent, you're sharing how you feel about it, but also sharing about how you're going to get through it. And you're doing it by remaining and maintaining your authenticity and your integrity, and you're doing it in your own voice. You want to anchor in your sphere of influence, control what you can control, focus in everyday actions that are going to have an impact on those around you in meetings, in one on one sessions, at lunch, in different sessions. Demonstrate inclusive leadership behaviors, and others will mirror that, and you'll create a ripple effect. Practice courageous allyship, not performative allyship. Be an active ally to those that identify differently than you do. Help them to find their voice. Help them to be empowered. Help them throughout the day to day interactions that you have with them through meetings, through encounters, so you can practice courageous leadership and allyship. Speak up on behalf of those who haven't found the courage yet to elevate their own voices. And then sustain your own voice and your values. When people see you doing that, they will come to you more, and it gives you an opportunity to grow as a leader within your own space. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, yeah, I will try again tomorrow. I love that quote. And then the last thing I want to leave you, if you're feeling discouraged, if you're feeling like these changes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is this is something that I value. It's the reason why I came to this organization, and now all these changes are happening. Trying to stop diversity, equity, and inclusion is like trying to stop the waves from reaching the shore. Diversity is differences. There are differences in people, those you can see and those you can't see. Organizations are made up of people with those differences. Inclusion is when you surround them with a culture where you take all of those differences and you get them to a point where you can leverage them towards a collective purpose. And then equity, those are all of the individual actions and collective actions that you need to put in place where you meet those different people with all of those differences where they are, understand what it is that they need to succeed, skills, capabilities, strengths, obstacles, barriers, and get them and move them forward to that collective purpose. So, in an organization, trying to stop diversity, equity, and inclusion is really trying to stop waves from reaching the shore. It just isn't possible. And so, while people may want to try to clamp down on it, it's not really doing anything because people are individuals. They have a lot of different identities embodied in one individual. And you have to be able to understand that. It's management 101, it's leadership 101, it's business 101, in trying to understand your customers who are also very, very diverse, or your clients. And so I offer that bit of encouragement for all of you. My grandmother used to say, this too shall pass. In times of social activism, usually what follows are times of conservatism. That's what we're seeing right now. But the pendulum is going to swing, and the times of activism will return if they, and I don't even say, I don't think, I know that they haven't diminished. They may have diminished in your organization, but they're very, very much still alive within society because, as I said, people are people and individuals. So, with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Will and open it up for any questions that you might have.
For sure. So thank you, Celeste, and to all of you all that are still here with us. We have Celeste until about 1 o'clock. So we definitely wanted to have a live Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to submit those using the Q&A feature within Zoom. If you like to use the raise hand feature, you can raise your hand and come off of mute to ask your question, or you can drop it in the chat. But I do have some pre-submitted questions to get us started in our live Q&A, as well as one question that already came in. But I want to start for those that maybe missed our intro, Celeste. I like to give folks a little bit of context. I'm going to start. I'm going to kick off the first question, and it's a contextual question for your
Mhm.
background, which I think could help open up the floor for additional questions. So that question is, in your former role as a chief diversity officer at a Fortune top 50 company, what were some of the typical themes you dealt with in that role? And before you retired from that role, what kind of changes did you witness before you left the role earlier this year?
Yeah, you name it, I dealt with it. It was funny. Towards the end of my tenure, some of my friends were calling me the Olivia Pope of the company because it wasn't just about crisis management. It wasn't all about that, but it was about how do I make sure that all these people within the organization globally that we're able to optimize what they bring to the table, that we're able to um, make sure that they can bring their whole selves into the organization, not strip off who they are and as as far as their identity, because that really helps them to help us with innovation, with creativity, with being able to meet the needs of our customers and our patients. That was just very, very critical to the organization. And so, some of the challenges might have been, if we had managers or leaders that just didn't embrace it or they didn't understand the importance that it played in with our people within the organization, within our culture, our business especially. And so being able to meet people where they were and help them to understand the impact that diversity, equity, inclusion has on the organization and why it's really, really important. That to me was the essence of the role. And people are from all different walks of life, all different countries, and it just was really, really important. I think, especially this year, helping people to as I talked about, manage the changes that were happening within the organization in such a way where they could still be their authentic selves, where they could still have an impact and still drive inclusion throughout the organization, and helping them to understand that inclusion and diversity are foundational elements within the organization, just like dignity, respect. It's all woven together, and helping people to understand that, because there was, people were just really, really concerned with, what do I do? What do I say? How do I act? How's it going to be interpreted? And continue to demonstrate inclusive leadership. That's what's important. And when you get to the essence of that and treating people with dignity and respect, you can't go wrong. No one can say that they don't want an inclusive culture. No one can say they don't want an inclusive society. Well, some people might say that, but most people don't say that, and so they want to do things that bring people together because that's what makes an organization successful in today's environment.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to jump into our first question
Mhm.
that was submitted using the Q&A feature here in Zoom anonymously. And that question was, I am unapologetically passionate about addressing anti-Blackness and
Mm.
critical race theory tenets of storytelling and counter storytelling. elevating the voices of Black folks. I'm
Hmm.
finding it extremely difficult to remain authentic and impactful addressing Black realities and systemic inequality in this current environment. Can you provide guidance? Oh, we got another question. Move down here. Can you provide guidance on how to authentically, intentionally, and explicitly address anti-Blackness?
Yeah. So, um, what I have done is I understand that I am only as good as the messages that I'm able to, or the influence that I'm able to make with individuals within an organization. And what I mean by that is if I say something, I need my message to come across and I need them to receive it. Now, they can either embrace it or they can choose to, hey, we can agree to disagree. But if we're going to engage in the dialogue, if I'm going to take the opportunity to engage in the dialogue, I have to make sure that my message is being received. And so I have to do it in a way where they will understand it, at least intellectualize it. And again, as I said, if they don't embrace it, then they choose to embrace it. I can't make people embrace diversity, equity, inclusion. I can't do that. You can't do that. Nobody can do that. You can't make someone do something. But what I like to say and what I did specifically was I grounded it in the values of the organization, the culture of the organization. And what I would say is I take the me out of it. So I deliver the message and I deliver it in a way, again, not pounding the fist on, not laying blame, because we know in the area of the black history, American history, and not just America, colonization is around the world. Um, that we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way where they can understand what you're trying to say, understand why it's important. And a lot of times you have to do that without establishing the blame game because that turns people off right away. I've done that. I've seen it countless times. But if I'm doing and I'm talking in a way that provides them with, data, storytelling, messages, ways that they can understand it, and historical references, then I've done my job. I've given them the information. And again, they can either agree to embrace it or not. But I also do it in a way that basically says, the organization's values are around dignity and respect, understanding different backgrounds, people that are different from you, and respecting those backgrounds and differences. And if that is something that you can't understand or it goes against your values, maybe this isn't the company for you. And as a manager, as a leader, I would ingrain it and integrate it into the company's values. So it wasn't a me versus them. It was hey, these are the values of the company foundationally. And, you either get with the program or you don't. And so that's kind of how I do it. But if you want someone to understand that message, you have to present it in a way and communicate it in a way that they would receive it and don't get angry if they don't embrace it because as I said, everyone's not going to embrace every message that we have. Took me a long time to learn that message and learn that lesson. So I don't say that with, oh yeah, I'm all cool with it. I still to this day get kind of miffed when people don't understand and have different views on diversity, equity, inclusion. But hey, it is what it is.
Awesome. We've got another couple of questions. Tertia, if you'd like to rephrase that question for me, with a little bit of context, I'd be glad to pose that to Celeste as a follow-up. But I did get one more question in
Mhm.
the live Q&A feature. And the question is, in the spirit of teaching is reminding, do you have any recommendations for quick trainings for hiring teams? So folks who aren't on the HR team but participate in a 360 hiring experience to remind participants on the hiring side that, hey, yes, you have biases and you need to be very aware of that fact during the interview process to push against those biases coloring how you see the candidates. Any recommendations?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to steal your thunder, Will, because you're going to talk about something at the end that you're going to do next year in 26 that all talent acquisition advisors and recruiters and staffers should attend. But yeah, I would say, and let me give you the context. Unfortunately, in these times, there are a lot of learning and training programs and events that have been um, eliminated or um, changed in a lot of different organizations. I get that. But that shouldn't stop you from wanting to build your own skills and capabilities. And I applaud you for asking the question. What I would say is, and here's what I do. I Google, I get on and I Google, or I go to Chat GPT, or I go to some other AI source or whatever, and I, put in what I want to learn, what I want to develop in, what skills I want to develop, and I get a laundry list of free webinars, um, um, programs, conferences, different things that I can attend and avail myself to continue to build my skills and capabilities and competencies in specific areas. So that's what I would do. I know some of the environments out there. I've talked with colleagues across different companies, and for various different reasons, budget cuts and um, looking at various different diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and rolling them back, or webinars and different things they were doing. But I would, if that's the case in your company, then I would invest in myself by going and looking at different things that I can attend and avail myself to, because there's lots of stuff out there. And then secondly, leverage your employee resource groups. Go to their developmental sessions, learn about different cultures, learn about different things, and um, and that'll help you in your role. But that's basically kind of what I would do. I would seek out different uh, entities, organizations that provide those type of training that I need to get better at my role. And believe me, especially in this day and age with the labor market being as diverse as it is, you're needing to understand diverse sourcing, how to pull candidates from different walks of life and cultures and backgrounds is critically important.
All right, excellent. Let's see here. Got any? Okay, so I had a pre-submitted question that came in, and that was, given evolving public discourse around DEI, do you
Mhm.
have any recommendations on how we, as talent acquisition professionals, can communicate the business case for diversity to skeptical stakeholders or decision makers?
Yes, yes, I can. Well, first of all, um, one thing that you do, and I know a lot of companies are moving away from providing data to people that are not executives within the organization, employee data. So I don't know what's going on within your respective organization, but what you can do, and a big reality check, is provide them with data around the labor market. And you can get that information through various different means. Like I said, Google, Chat GPT, whatever. But get the data around the diversity of the candidates that are out there in the labor market. Get the data around the different generations that are in the labor market, and talk to them about Generation Z, which is growing in the number of in the percentage of people in the labor market. Talk to them about what the values are of Gen Z. Talk about how they want to go to organizations where that have the same values and beliefs that they do. Talk to them about the skills and the capabilities that are prevalent in this generation. Talk to them about this, because if they want to get someone for their role, hiring managers, that are skeptical whenever you say, okay, I'm going to bring you a diverse candidate slate, or I'm going to try to make sure that you have a candidates that are of different backgrounds and walks of life and identities. If you get pushback on that, show them the data from the labor market. Nobody can stop you from doing that. If you can't show what's happening within your company for various different reasons, then you can show the information that's happening in the labor market. And then tell them, take that information and say, this is the story that it's telling. The labor market is very diverse. If you want it, there is a war on talent, especially for the fact that I was reading an article the other day, and a lot of kids are choosing, they're coming out of high school, are choosing not to go to college. They're choosing another journey to build their own skills and capabilities and what they want to do throughout their life and their next chapter of their life. They're picking up trades. They're becoming entrepreneurs and starting their own companies. Who thought 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't even know what influencers were. But there's all these different types of roles that exist that they're choosing not even to go to college. So if you're an organization that is your sourcing is coming out of, for early talent is coming out of colleges, that is really starting to diminish. And also too, what's hit the headlines that in the last couple of years, the last couple of college classes, white males have been diminishing in colleges and universities. And so, you have to make sure that hiring managers and people within your organizations, they understand that the labor market has evolved. And if they don't understand and they want to be able to be a player in this war on talent, you have to be able to understand and be able to attract all different types of talent across all different walks of life and identity. So, keep at them from that standpoint. And I challenge them. Now I know sometimes this gets hard because you're under the gun to be able make sure you're bringing in talent. I get that, but when you say to a hiring manager and you say, okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm able to bring in diverse talent that you can choose from, and they say, well, I want to make sure that it's quality talent, challenge them. I've done this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times before as an HR business partner throughout my career in different companies. Well, can I stop you for a second? What do you mean by I want to make sure that they're quality talent? What did you mean by that? And ask them that. And when they start hemming and hawing, because you know what they meant, but ask them, challenge them. And again, as I said, do it with dignity and respect, but get them to really understand that you saying that just showed me your bias that you think diverse talent is inferior, doesn't have the skills and the capabilities that you need for your role. And then, secondly, you're insulting me as a talent acquisition advisor, as a recruiter, that I'm going to hire someone based on what they look like. I understand the skills and the capabilities, the experience that you need for your role, and I will bring you that quality candidate. But what I'm telling you is that you can get those skills and capabilities embodied in different identities. And let me go out and get that for you. So I hope that makes sense. But a lot of times, like I said, I've been in those conversations. I've been in the trenches where throughout my career where managers say that. In my younger self, I used to say it in a way that maybe didn't make them treat them with dignity and respect. But now I learned that, again, that message that you want them to hear and you want them to understand and reflect on what they said.
Excellent. So I want to get one more question in because Tertia actually mentioned a response to one of your earlier answers around that first question that we kicked things off with around anti-blackness and awareness. And you mentioned grounding the message and the values of the company. So her follow-up it was, what if the company or institution has completed a new strategic plan and the values have changed and there's little connection with DEI?
Can you repeat that, Will?
Sure. So when you mentioned earlier about grounding your message in the company values, what if the company values have changed, or
Hmm.
they changed their strategic plan and the values have changed, and there's little connection with DEI?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is that old song, Should I Stay or Should I Go? If it is to the point where um, it is just not the company that you chose when you came to the organization, then you have to make that decision yourself. But I would say that if the company first really examine what that means, when the company says, well, we're rolling back, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, really take stock in, well, what does that mean? Because as I said, all companies are made up of people. They're not made up of laptops, desks, brick and mortar. They're made up of people. And so when someone, let's say your manager or your leader or whatever says that, um, ask them the question, well, how are you going to value the employees across the organization for what they can bring to this organization? How are you going to value that? How are you going to ensure that people have the skills, the capabilities that they need to be able to thrive? And those skills and capabilities, those needs, those um, obstacles and barriers are different for different people. How are you going to make sure that we can continue to thrive in this organization? Ask those questions because, people, when they say things like that, they don't understand the essence of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They don't understand how I explained it. Diversity is differences in people. Inclusion is how you get them to that collective purpose, and equity are the acts that you do with to the people with all those differences to get them to that collective purpose. They don't understand that. So just ask the questions first, and then in asking those questions and you're having this dialogue with this person or this leaders or whatever, you might even get them to understand that, you're right. It's nothing but good management, good leadership, and good business. And it helps to, at least in your sort of, as I said, sphere of influence, you can get them to continue the body of work and continue, enabling folks around you to thrive. But challenge it, take scope, ask the questions, and if it gets to a point where you can't thrive as an individual in that organization, then you have to make that decision as to whether another organization might be better for you.
Excellent. So Celeste, if you would do me the favor of
Mhm.
maybe bringing up that last slide that you had, I want to
Okay.
make sure that folks have your contact information. I think Louisa from my team just dropped it in the chat. So to everyone that's still with us, to everyone maybe watching this video of the presentation, you right here on the screen, you'll have Celeste's contact information. We will also follow up via email so that you can follow up with Celeste in case you would like to have Celeste in for a speaking engagement or a workshop or an advisory session. Those are services that Celeste now provides. And also, we will be continuing our series of these free lunch and learn sessions to allow you all to come in, learn from some of our experience and ask questions. And one that is very relevant that we're going to bring Celeste back for is titled Voice and Velocity Elevating Recruiter Impact on Inclusive Hiring. So I think that's very relevant to some of the questions that came in. It's in a workshop designed for recruiters and talent acquisition advisors and leaders that Celeste will lead for us as well. So, Celeste, let me thank you, first of all, for presenting and sharing your experience. And to those that are with us, those that are watching this recording, feel free to reach out to Celeste. Again, her email is celeste at celestewarrenconsulting.com. Her website is crwdiversity.com. And you can or see we'll put the LinkedIn information in the description for the video as well as in our follow-up from email from this event. So Celeste, would you like to close out with any other points or information that folks should know before we close out?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Will, and to you and to HBCU Connect for the opportunity to engage and have this conversation, a very important conversation that we need right now, because I could just sense from everyone on the line that you are going through exactly what we talked about during this webinar. So thank you for the opportunity. Please feel free to reach out to me, even if it's just to have a conversation to talk about what you might be going through. I am looking forward to the next session that I'm able to talk with a lot of you because I think it's going to be a great session. And have a great holiday season too, as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Celeste, again for taking the time out, and thank you for all of you all who are still with us for joining. And we look forward to our next chat and lunch and learn. So thank you all. Happy holidays. Take care.